Okay. It is about 10:36, and the second public hearing is in place. For the record, I'm Frank Thorwald. Who's on the phone?
Dale Nations.
Stephen Cooper. Bill Feierabend.
And we have enough for a quorum. This meeting, public hearing, is in session. Dennis, would you please give us a summary of the issues regarding Arizona Energy Partners?
Arizona Energy Partners received a permit for drilling for oil according to the well spacing required by oil and gas rules for drilling for oil in April of 2017 for the AEP 2-1 MS, which is a Manuel Seep. Anyway, in April 2017, and it's since been decided by Arizona Energy Partners (AEP) that they would like a well spacing exception, so that they can also drill and test for gas that they may encounter in this well. So the purpose of the hearing today is to have AEP present their justification for why they believe they should be granted an exception for well spacing. And I guess I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, although I do have to set up the...
You're here for Arizona Energy Partners.
Yes, yeah. My name is Jamie Hoke. And I did have 4 slides. I know today's agenda is very long, so I just wanted to provide, if the commission will allow me, 4 slides to just, number one, justify both the geologic and the topographic justification for the location.
Does any of the commissioners object to that?
No.
Jamie, can you spell your last name for me, please?
It's Hogue, Hogue.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
And just in a general sense, this well is located in Section 2, Township 12 North, 24 East, Apache County, Arizona. It is a state trust land lease. It should be noted that the only other leases contiguous to this are owned by AEP or an affiliate of AEP. And proper notice was sent out to those, well, to ourselves basically, and to the state land office as well. We can go to the next slide. Generally, I just wanted to reiterate, this is just as general, looking at the Holbrook Basin, you hear and see this all the time. I want to reiterate the primary targets of this well are oil, so both Devonian and the Naco Pennsylvanian. There was a letter received by AEP in March of 2018 indicating that we would not be able to test for any gases in this well, which led us to this point in requesting an exception request to make sure that our ability to test for gases in our drilling activities would not be precluded. So next slide. And generally, if you're familiar with the Holbrook Basin, which I'm sure most of you are, our formation, our targets are in about the 4,000 foot range. So down here, you've got the Devonian down here, and the Pennsylvania Naco. If you think about it regionally, Mogollon Rim is to the south as you head northeast towards Defiance Plateau and the Navajo Nation in the northeast. Our target area is right here. So you can see that the targets are starting to pinch out, which is exactly why we selected this area. From a regional context, I just wanted to provide that overview so you can see exactly why we targeted the location that we did. Next slide. And here's another map that shows, here's the location that we selected for this well. Here's the Manuel Seep, which on the localized level is the target that we're chasing. So obviously, the structure that we're chasing, structural feature. You can see that this is the well location in relation to the section line. There is a regional anticlinal feature, that plays into the decision to place the well in this location. Next slide.
Excuse me, before you go back to it, please. Scale. I don't see a scale there, I'm sorry. What are we talking from 2-1 to the, I assume
this is the
that's
section line?
Section line.
Yes.
What is that horizontal distance? I mean, I'd guess it'd be like 200 feet or 100 or some small number?
It's actually not. So from the east line, we're about 2,300 feet, so 2,376 feet, and about 1,100 feet from the south line.
Okay.
I think I might have my notes backwards looking at this. It might be flipped around. But we're very close to the gas spacing, the 1,600 foot requirement. So we are not in the hundreds of feet, we're thousands of feet away. And we do own this lease right there. So next slide. In this area, the topography generally ties to the geology. So you can see the manual seep physically on the surface. In this area, you have drainage in these. I've tried to inlay the topography, the elevation lines in here. They're barely visible. But you see we have regional drainage that's coming towards this manual seep structure. Then we also have additional drainage from a topography standpoint coming from the southwest as well. So in this section area, our goal is to try to stay as close to the manual seep as we possibly can, because we're hoping there's a pinch out there that we can trace, while also avoiding putting ourselves into a floodplain situation where we're going to be in a sheet flow area. And you can see generally the center section of the section, very flat, lower elevation, and it gets lower and flatter as you head to this northwestern direction. So again, with the goal of trying to stay close to the manual seep, trying to avoid the elevation challenges and the potential water and flooding issues here, this was the location that we chose. You can also see Molino Road, trying to be mindful of the local ranching activities, ensuring that we're placing a well that's close to existing roads and not having to build additional infrastructure to support the well. So that's generally, I know that's a quick overview, but I just wanted to give you both a general geological understanding as well as a topographical understanding of why this location was selected. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I do. This is Bill Feyerabend. What do you mean by testing for gas? I worked my way through college partly working for Bayreuth logging, and you had the drill fluids go through, and you create the graph showing gas. Is that testing? Is it, what exactly are we talking about testing for gas here? Is it kind of the automatic testing of drill fluids as you drill? Is it after the fact then setting up specific tests on specific horizons? What do you talk about? What do you mean by testing for gas?
So I think that's some of the uncertainty that was in the letter we received from the Oil and Gas Commission that led us to this point. Primarily, the language of the letter only said we are not allowed to test for gas. So it was unclear if we were even allowed to test for gas during our drilling activities without violating the spirit of that letter. And also, let's all keep in mind this is a wildcat well. We don't have any defined reservoirs. We're chasing potential targets. Yeah. So if we're going to invest several $100,000 into a well, if those oil plays and those shows don't work out, the ability to come uphole and at least test for other gas or other structures, such as helium in the sandstones above, would be an option we'd want to have available to us. In other states that I've worked in, New Mexico, Montana, Texas, in those jurisdictions, they actually have administrative processes you can go through. If you're in a wildcat scenario, your targets don't play out and you want to come uphole or to focus on a different target, that may transition your well from an oil to a gas well classification.
And by gas, you're talking helium, not natural gas?
It could. Who knows if there's a gas cap on any of these oil targets.
Ms. Hogue, may I make a quick comment? The reason I believe you were not allowed to test for gas was because of the well spacing exception itself, because it didn't meet our rule.
Correct.
Which is the reason you're here today.
Yes.
And that was made clear, I believe, in a follow-up letter from Mr. Turner to your client, just for the record.
Yes, absolutely. We just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. Obviously, once you commit the resources to bring the drilling work out and start the activities, that wouldn't be the time for us to be having a disagreement on testing activities. So we're doing this to ensure our ability to test all, and we do have rights to all depths on this well. So the ability to at least test during drilling activities, and obviously if there's the possibility of recovery of payable quantities, then the target would change, obviously, in a wildcat environment.
I have a question. This is Dale.
Go ahead, Dale.
Jamie, how much Devonian do you expect to find in this well? How big?
Oh, you must have, I didn't ask you to ask that question, but I'm very grateful you did. PetroSun, which is the parent company of AEP, drilled a well in section 14 north, 25 east. What is this well? The NMAL 15-1. So it would be northeast, and if you remember that structural map, the Devonian starts to pinch out as you go into the northeast. So that well, 8 miles northeast of here, had a 48-foot section of Devonian, so it was a fully intact section of Devonian that was included in the core for that well. So we're hoping that we'll have an even greater show of Devonian in a well that's further to the southwest and down structure.
But it would be thicker, right?
Correct. That's what we're hoping for, yes.
It's farther away from the pinch out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Question?
Go ahead.
This is Bill. So we've established there are two kinds of testing. One is while you're drilling, excuse me, and the other is you come back in and set up for specific testing on horizons. Is there any restrictions on them doing just kind of the standard testing as you're drilling, which would include generating kind of it's actually automatic results for gases? Are there any causes for problems with that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, it's the language in the March 29th letter, which I have a copy of, wasn't clear to us. It didn't differentiate between the testing that you do during your drilling phase versus the producing phase. We understand the letter saying you cannot produce a gas, I don't want to say natural gas, but a gas unless you obtain approval for a spacing exception. But the letter simply states that we are prohibited from testing for producing gas in any geologic structure.
Without an exception?
There's no exception in here.
Oh, there's no exception.
The well spacing exception, the well spacing was the basis on why you couldn't test for gas. Now, if the well spacing is approved, now you're free to move forward, I believe.
Correct, but I just never encountered a jurisdiction that would make that blanket of a statement, because there are testing activities that you do during drilling. We have rights to all of those depths. So one interpretation of this letter could be that you're precluding us from even doing the testing we would do during drilling activities. So again, we didn't want there to be any misunderstanding or miscommunication when the money's already been invested and the equipment's on the ground. From a practical standpoint, we would likely request spacing exception requests for all of our wells to ensure that there is no misunderstanding in the future.
Any other discussion? Any motions?
Yeah, this is Dale. I think the issue about testing during drilling is somewhat irrelevant here because that's a standard drilling procedure. The other thing is I think that this is justified by geological interpretation, and I move that we grant the spacing spacing waiver on this particular one. Anyway, I got my words crossed up here, but I grant that we move to grant the waiver of spacing requirement.
The well spacing exception, Mr. Nations? Is that
yes, that's what I mean.
I second that. Is there any discussion before we vote?
Mr. Chair, because this is a public hearing, I don't know if there was anybody else that wished to speak to the issue, and I want to make sure we didn't cut anybody off.
That's a good point. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this issue?
I'd just like to comment.
Please state your name.
My name is James Ballard. On a couple things, I don't know whether this is going to be a mud drilled or air drilled well, but there's actually some safety issues with testing the well, quote unquote, mud logging as we normally call it, or testing the quantity and nature of the gas that is drilled while drilling, produced while drilling. So I would be surprised if the regulations actually prohibited that, but I'm not really aware of one way or the other. The only other issue I just want to bring up is I want to say, this kind of exception has been granted before, and for geologic reasons and for the lack of concern over drainage because of their land position. And I just want to bring up that that's probably one of the only areas where these kind of exceptions should be granted is when the leases are actually held that could potentially be drained because of 40-acre drilling in a better gas reservoir. So that would be my only area of concern. I think it's been addressed. There's an adequate offset leasehold to protect anyone else from being drained.
If the commission will allow me to make one other point. The other, another means of, another thing to think about is the manual seat is right here, and that could potentially create a barrier from potentially damaging at least this lease right here and potentially down here. So we don't know that. We don't have enough data to know at this point, but there could be a natural barrier that's protecting drainage from an adjoining lease as well. And I just wanted to make sure that was out there as an informational point.
Is anybody else?
Yeah, I get the Joe Dixon of the State Land Department again, too. I just say on behalf of the State Land Department, we would certainly have no objection to the spacing exception here. This is our land, so
Commissioners,
that's worth.
anyone else? In that case, all in favor of the motion?
Can we restate the motion before we
Yes,
vote, please?
please do that. Dale, please restate the motion.
I move that we approve the well spacing exception for the Energy Partners 2-1 well.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. We have a few minutes before the public hearing starts, so this public hearing is concluded.